This morning, we're going to discuss ACC's 2024 Assets Declaration Drive and, of course, Sierra Football Association's boss on alleged corruption investigation and generally the fight against corruption in the country, among other things, this morning. And for that, we've been joined by Alex Barr. He is Assistant Public Relations Officer, Anti-Corruption Commission. And, of course, we're also joined by Sheku Putka Kabara. Sheku is a renowned journalist, editor, and political analyst. Good morning, gentlemen, and a warm welcome.
Yes, good morning, Victor. Good morning, Zulaikatu, is that the name?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, yes, yes. And good morning, viewers.
Indeed.
Always a pleasure being here.
Indeed. But please, what does the picture look like when you talk about asset declaration? Do we see a decline or an improvement, in the cooperation from people generally?
Yes, we have seen not just an improvement, but a tremendous improvement.
Okay.
Because in 2019, we looked at the compliance rates when it comes to asset declaration. Before that time, it was, in fact, the process was quite inefficient. It was quite ineffective. We were recording minimum compliance rates because of a host of reasons. So what informed the tremendous increase is the asset declaration regime. When we went to Parliament, we redefined it. We made it compulsory. Well, it was compulsory before that time, but then we tailored it. It were for public officers across the board, but it's now for grade 7 upwards, save for public officers that have fiduciary responsibility, regardless of their grade. It is compulsory for them to declare. That is, for example, procurement officers, those exposed to finances, or politically exposed persons. And we also ensure that we have sanctions in place for non-compliance. So what we did, Section 122 of the 2019 amendments, we specified the sanctions that after the statutory period, which is the 31st of March in every declaration year, we made it biannual every 2 years. Public officers that fail to declare their asset, we would, of course, publish their names, would send their names to their offices. They would be informed that the ACC have, of course, submitted their names for non-compliance. And if they fail to declare after that first limb of sanction, the second limb would be forfeiture of salaries. So they would forfeit their salaries. So it would return again to the Consolidated Revenue Fund. Not exceeding 3 months, we would effect the third limb, which is suspension. And the final limb is ultimate dismissal, because accountability, it is non-negotiable. When you enter public service, within 3 months, you have to declare your assets, so we know exactly what you have. Every 2 years, we keep track of what you've been able to accrue within your time in public service, and we also have exit declaration. And that is why we've seen we have been recording maximum compliance rate in the previous 2 declaration sessions.
Okay. But you cannot tell me that everyone has been complying.
That is why I mentioned we have been recording maximum, not total compliance rate. So that is why we have the sanctions in place, because you have public officers that will still prove to be recusants. So when we effected the first limb of sanctions, we were seeing public officers that were coming helter-skelter. In fact, I met at some point somebody that was telling me, he even lectured me and all. He said, well, una don't kill me, una don't seize me salary and all. So basically, what we used to obtain before this time was that some of these things, they were just laws that were there, and others, in fact, they had no knowledge about it. But because we have all of these sanctions, public officers, they now know that they take it seriously. If not, you would definitely face what the law provides as a sanction or penalty for non-compliance. So across the world, for anti-graft institutions, one of the most difficult things is for public officers to be accountable, is for people to declare their assets. And what we've done in the past 2 years, in the past 2 declaration sessions specifically, It's nothing short of miracle. We are one of the few countries in the continent that are able to record over 95% compliance rate in asset declaration. So we're still moving, but what we've done is impressive thus far.
Morning, Sheko. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
You've been following for a while. Do you think this asset declaration law has any benefits in the fight against corruption?
I would want to answer in the affirmative, being that it is now a statutory mandate for the ACC to uphold its concept of ensuring that ministries, departments, and agencies, and civil servants in general, are able to declare assets. So, without delegating further, I would say yes, it is something that is a progress on the part of the ACC. So, it's a necessity.
And Ba, you said almost 100% compliance rate, right?
Yes.
The question I would love to ask is this. Now, let's talk about the broader picture in the fight against corruption. Do you think these asset declarations have helped you in any way as an entity in the fight against graft in Sierra Leone?
Yes.
And in what ways do you think that is?
Yes, it has helped us. In fact, it is part of the best practices that is articulated in different regional, in fact, sub-regional, and even global anti-corruption, documents. For example, the ONCAC, the AUC, PCC, African Union, and ECOWAS protocol for state parties, the anti-graft institutions, to put more emphasis on asset declaration because it is a preventive prong of fighting corruption. It is not the fire brigade approach, which is also fine, but it gives us an idea. It is very difficult for people to comply or for people to be accountable. So what we've done now, with even some of the sanctions, during our declaration sessions, we do a lot of public education to inform people while endearing them to come and declare. But those that fail to declare, we make it clear that the sanctions are there and we've been effecting these sanctions. So if you know that every 2 years you're going to the ACC to declare your assets, if you know that it's compulsory when you have been appointed within 3 months to declare your assets, and we also have penalties for concocted declaration, that is false declaration. There are penalties. So it would in itself let you have an idea that you have to be careful, because if we have reasons, for example, to investigate you for any alleged corrupt practices, our first point of call is to check your asset declaration, and we look at it. So if we realize that your earnings, your by way of remuneration is not commensurate, let's say, to what you have and all, then that is a red flag that requires us to institute investigation. So by and large, it has helped us. And interestingly, Victor, what we've also done quite recently is that we have now a department exclusively created to handle asset declaration and asset management. Before this time, we only have asset declaration unit. But because of how important that is in preventing corruption, we have an entire directorate, an entire department now for asset declaration and asset management at the ACC.
Have there been any recent cases, where we've seen non-compliance and, this has been brought up? Or have you been able to flag any unexplained wealth?
Yes, we have had, of course, a number of instances where it has required us to invoke what the law provides as by way of sanctions. So, like I even stated, the sanctions provided for by law do not necessarily require us in its express form to take people to court for non-compliance, but of course we have their names sent to their different human resource departments. We also have them forfeit their salaries. We have done that. We write to the Accountant General's department. We submit the names of public officers that they failed to comply with the asset declaration for their salaries to be seized. We've done that for a number of public officers.
Is the information available to the public?
So we make it known, for example, in platforms like these, when we effect some of these sanctions. And we also make it known to the institutions that are concerned, because the importance of this is to encourage people to be accountable. And we've had a culture in this country where people, they avoid being accountable. They feel like it's it's people going after them and all. So it's quite a challenge, but we're finding our way around it quite seamlessly. So that is basically what we've been doing. And for issues of unexplained wealth, basically, we've had general matters before this time even, where we've investigated people generally. Sometimes those things would form part of the investigation. So for example, if we have reasons in some instances to say we institute investigations, sometimes it would not only fall within the scope of Section 36, which often has some bearing with it, misappropriation of funds, embezzlement and all. Sometimes it will also require the provision that has to do with asset declaration, which connects to accruing wealth that cannot be provided for or cannot be explained. But by and large, what I would say is that what we've seen in our previous declaration sessions in 2022, we recorded over 95% compliance rate. It shows how much we have been really doing in terms of sensitization, in terms of even our customized meetings that we have in government institutions, how much our integrity management committees have also been doing in endearing their staff within these institutions to comply with this, knowing fully well that we have punitive sanctions that are meted for non-compliance.
Okay, we'll go over to the headline case, which we would want you to talk about, but briefly before that, Sheku, how would you describe the fight against corruption in Sierra Leone? Are we making any progress?
If we go by the literature, I think there has been a drop in the fight against corruption, in the sense there was a time when there was a huge increase in so far as the numbers are concerned. But we can also understand when it comes to the prevailing circumstances. Now, if I speak from a leftist perspective, you would have views that assert or claim that the current leadership of the ACC, and mark you, Ben has been in charge since the presidency, of Julius Maada Bio, they claim that he is going more against opposition figures. But perhaps that's an argument for another day, because by my estimation, the current fight against corruption is not targeting more of the opposition. I see more of governance and accountability issues on various ministries, departments, and agencies. But like I said, that is dependent on who you talk to. But if you ask me, we're discussing assets declaration now. On a normal level, I think there has to be a way we discuss matters of a duty to self and a duty to society. Whilst the ACC has a job of ensuring that people declare assets, I think it is my personal view that all of us have that individualistic responsibility to ensure that we uphold accountability. Because when you talk about looting state funds, for example, if we all understand the salary scales of civil servants, we would not be constrained to understand why someone who is paid less than 10,000 leones is able to afford something over 500 million leones. So in the end, the disparities will be able to speak for themselves. In journalism, we say the facts will speak for themselves. So to me, whilst the fight against corruption is winnable, I think we have a lot of systemic and institutional challenges that tend to disrupt some of the fight. And one thing I would always say is, like Alex is saying, if you ask any ACC staff, they will tell you that they are under-resourced, because you're talking about the whole country. The ACC is meant for the whole of Sierra Leone. You have over 8 million people now with a staff capacity of less than 500, if I'm not mistaken. You can suggest that the ACC is understaffed to even do its work. So what that suggests to all of us is that we have a duty to ensure that we do what is right. Sometimes you don't need the ACC to come after you if you really want to do your job, because in the end, I am a civil servant, for example. I am not sure I've had any dealing with the ACC, because as far as I am concerned, it is my responsibility to uphold that which I am supposed to do. So everybody cannot be Sheku Putka Kamal, but I'm just saying, if we do what is right, we can help and complement the effort of ACC to make the fight winnable. So whilst the fight against corruption has been ongoing, we would have to acknowledge the fact that there was a time when indeed, according to the Transparency International report, we were doing some excellent job. But as it stands, we can understand that it is not the making of ACC to be going through some of these challenges, because my thinking is if we do not have individuals and institutions, we would not be having some of these challenges. So that is why I'm calling on all of us to actually have that collective sense of responsibility, to understand that we have a duty to self and a duty to society. And that would be a fundamental proposition that I'll hold on to any time, any day.
And you know, when we talk about corruption, oftentimes people think it's just those who occupy high offices. But within our communities, in schools, in whether it's the marketplace or wherever you find yourself, we often find people as well who would rather not want to follow a state path, but then, you know, again, the way I go bypass and all, and involved in corrupt practices.
Yeah.
What would you say is the mindset of the average Sierra Leonean, you know, in our daily business and dealings with one another?
Okay, I think I'll classify this under the public sphere philosophy, where we tend to have a general perception about how things operate in a country. In Sierra Leone, for example, we are more concerned about those big names when it comes to corruption matters or what have you. You know, in news writing, we would say dramatization. Yeah, the issue becomes news when the matter becomes worse. Now, whilst we have a responsibility of focusing on, call it government appointees or what have you, I think all of us have a duty to ensure that we do what is right. Because to me, when you talk corruption, it's basically a concept of you not doing what is right. You know, like the scenario you're raising, there's a situation where if you get to follow up on the transportation sector, for example, you have drivers who are supposed to charge 5 leone per way, one way, but then they would ask you for 10, 15 leones. That in itself is an act of corruption. But then sometimes we are more like accomplices to all of these things. You would have 3 passengers standing waiting for a 5 leone cab. You would have one person who is willing to pay 25 leone because he or she can afford that. You would have another person who only has 5 leone. I mean, logically speaking, the driver is obliged to even follow the person who is willing to pay 25 leone, even when the law provides that it is 5 leone that we're to pay. So systemic corruption is entrenched in a sense. Sometimes the feel-good factor, or what I would call individualistic gratification, tends to overshadow what we are, supposed to do as a people. Aside from the transport sector, in the marketplaces, for example, I have seen firsthand where, I go to the markets when I want to. I've seen firsthand where people perhaps would dent a cup to sell pepper, to sell granules, to what. So you begin to ask them, why is this the case? They will tell you because the prices are skyrocketing. But then my thinking is, I am not an economist, but then demand and supply require that you sell as you buy, or you buy as you sell, just so that you get a bit of profit. But this is a country where you would want to suggest that people would want to get 100% profit scale on something that they may have bought for just 5 leone. They would want to have 20 leone. How does that work? If you say 10 leone, even on a 50% scale, it is a bit questionable. So to me, I think there is a need for more civic education and engagement, and it goes beyond agenda setting on the media landscape. It's about door-to-door sensitization. It's about having the requisite human resource capacity to reach out to these people, because like you're saying, there are sectors in society where if we discuss some of these things, they are not too concerned about those petty things they consider as petty corruption. To them, it has to be about what ACC brings to the table. That ACC has fined Ministry ABC, Minister ABC, the agency, what have you. That is their focus. So to me, I think if we start from the cradle, we would be able to have a divergent conversation when it comes to how we operate on a normal scale. Because if a minister heading a ministry sees that this common man heading a transport sector, just this layman, is being brought to book for not doing what is right, I think they would have a responsibility to reciprocate same. But if all of us begin to accept that this is Sierra Leone, Nayaso we day, let's do, Naso the country day, it becomes a problem. And I think these are conversations we need to be having, because these are issues we see on the ground, and that's why these, agendas are really necessary to be setting.
Alex, how do you bring the public along in the fight against corruption?
Yes, we have seen for most of the issues, even that Sheku has raised, these are the problems. So we've been doing a lot of public sensitization, a lot of public education to enlighten the people, to stimulate their consciousness, to understand that fighting corruption requires everybody. We as an institution, like Sheku also referenced, we are less than 300 for a population of well over 7 million Leones, and 7 million, and we are mandated by law to lead the fight against corruption. It's a national fight. We're only taking the lead. So we've been doing quite a number of sensitization. We do a lot of community engagement in different parts of Sierra Leone. We do a lot of public lectures. That's the commissioner himself. He leads the charge in these public lectures, going to every single university and college across this country, engaging young people that are the emerging generation. We use these platforms, we use social media effectively. You find us everywhere, in TikTok, on TikTok, Facebook, on all these platforms, because we understand that fighting corruption, it requires a lot more of prevention than the fire brigade approach. That is the reactive prong of fighting corruption. People have to be educated. We have existing structures, for example, in schools, that we regard as integrity clubs, because we need to catch them when they are young. Because sometimes in these schools, we tend to corrupt the mindsets of kids, that they would think that cheating their way through is a normal practice. And so it's a bit of a challenge. So if they continue that trend until they are in governance or in different facets of society, then it becomes so much of a problem at that stage. So we've been doing quite a lot. And if you'll observe, now when we talk about conversations around corruption, people take so much interest in it. The commissioner himself, he's always on the social media, because he understands the power of connecting with the people. And that is something we've been doing so seamlessly, but of course so radically.
Now to the headline case we mentioned, the alleged corruption investigation against the SLFA president. What do we need to know within the bounds of the law? What's the scope and the process so far?
Yes, so for that one, we commenced an investigations when we had several reports of some anomalies or improprieties at the Sierra Leone Football Association. And the investigations, it made us to believe that there are huge allegations of misappropriation of public funds, contrary to a lot of provisions, especially Section 36 of the Anti-Corruption Act, but also beyond that, issues of unauthorized withdrawals without documents to substantiate those withdrawals. That's sum up to the staggering tune of $720,000 US dollars, and also 450,000 new Leones. That's about 450 million Leones. So the allegations, or all of these damning allegations, or these scary amounts of money, it borders around the president of the Sierra Leone Football Association, Thomas Daddy Brima, because the outcome of our investigations made us to believe that between 2021 to 2025, there were huge amounts of transfers up to that $720,000 from the account of the SLFA into the personal account of the president of the Sierra Leone Football Association. And there are no documents as to why these transfers are made. But the only explanations that we've been given, that now these transfers, they are mostly done to reimburse for pre-financing done by the SLFA president. And ordinarily, recurring pre-finance raises a red flag. But way and beyond that, there has to be explanation, there has to be documents to show indeed that these monies meant for the people of Sierra Leone. How were these used? What was pre-finance? But what are documents? So it's more or less borders around, disregard to clear-cut, financial processes and procedures, which would make us to impute that it's an issue of misappropriation as alleged in this case. We had the president and other executive members of the SLFA under our belt. We've been investigating them. But what is also important, that the people need to know, that's what we've also informed them. And in all of this, the explanation that was provided to us by the president was that he acted in making all of these staggering withdrawals under what Section 36 of the SLFA statute provides. That is to say, he has the latitude, he has the power to use monies meant for the development of sport as and when he pleases. And the only explanation also provided for by the finance officer of the SLFA is that he was making all of these transfers acting under the authority and instruction of the SLFA president, and no other explanation was provided, nor any documents to show that indeed these monies were used for this purpose. I would reference one of them, also. The company was awarded a contract about $500,000 for construction of a technical, turf or so at SLFA Kintom. What we observed, the Lexons company that was awarded that contract, was that there were no due processes that were done. The documents that the company used, they were forged. So one of the auditing firms that audited the company, they made it clear that the NACIT document, for example, and even the signatures, they were all forged. They never signed to any of those. And in all of these processes in governance also, there are clear-cut procurement guidelines on how things should be done. And even the company, during our interviews, admitted that they forged these things. So over $500,000, that's no small money. And we've seen also how much the governments have expended, because we're a very sports-loving country, into sports. And some of these things, they are very serious. And there are things that they have the capacity, to hinder or impede the growth of sports. So by and large, there are other issues of conflict of interest. For example, about $17,000 was transferred from the SLFA account into the personal account of the president. In fact, it was transferred into one of the companies owned by the president, rather, casting road companies. But no explanation was given as to why that $17,000 was transferred. So these are all serious issues.
Why now? Why sports?
Why sports?
Yeah, why now? I think there was just a date to the ordinary Congress that, the SLFA was going to convene.
Okay, the first thing, why sports? We are concerned and we are mandated by law to look into issues of accountability, especially in terms of utilization of public resources meant for the people of Sierra Leone. So we are concerned whether it's sports, whether it's agriculture, or every other sector, we're mandated. But when it comes to what you're referencing also a day or two before the SLFA Congress, like we also noted resoundingly too, that we commenced these investigations some 6 months ago. And what we also have provided for, what we've also informed the public with respect to this outcome of the investigation, shows how serious this matter is. So investigations, they take time. Some matters we take over depending to the nature. Sometimes we would also even require some of our investigators to travel other parts of the world, because we have to adduce enough evidences. Because if we're determined at the end of every investigation what action we'll take, whether going to court or so, or other actions, it depends or hinges squarely on the quantum of evidence that we would have been able to adduce. So we have our defined timelines that guides our work at the ACC. And issues of corruption allegations, they have no holiday, no public holiday. And you cannot justify timing, you cannot justify wrongdoing by timing. So our focus as a commission is to work within the bounds of our timelines and evidences that direct us to any matter that we're investigating, and we do not countenance time. So if it happens that way, then our focus is not basically on that. Our focus is basically on issues that we're drawn to, the investigations, what it leads us to do, and what within the boundaries and scope of the law and other best practices informs our work as a commission.
Putka, this is a case of accountability, bankruptcy, if you like, but what does this say about the texture or caliber of, leaders we get in Sierra Leone, some of these positions of trust?
I would not want to use this particular affirmative case to assert on a universal affirmative notion, but then, in line with what Daddy Ibrahim has said the other day, I think he is very comfortable with all of the investigations, and that to me is a green light to suggest that he does not have anything against the ACC, just as how the ACC does not have anything against him. But then, I think it's about individuals and institutions to follow due processes. Sometimes I speak a lot with some of my accounting and economist friends, auditors or what have you, who will tell you that sometimes it is not as if you have embarked on any corrupt act. It is basically as a result of some systemic failure in upholding that which is to be done. So say, for example, submitting certain documents, following certain procedures. The money or cash may not go to you directly, but just because you used a means that is not appreciable or recommended, it becomes, an issue. So say, for example, there's conflict of interest, obviously. If Daddy Brahma owns companies, of course, I know he owns several, he is a contractor, he does a lot of other things outside football. Conflict of interest would basically tell you that you cannot award contracts to yourself. If I am the head of any institution, why should I award a contract to my own institution on an individual basis? So even without going into the laws, we would know that there's conflict of interest. When you speak procurement issues, that is why people go into open biddings, yeah? Going for competitive bidding. You go in for the utilitarian concept. The greatest good for the greatest number. So whilst I may not want to cast doubt on the aspirations of the SLFA presidency or cast doubt on the actions of the ACC, it is my estimation that all of this is geared towards ensuring that we go through the right systems and processes. Because in the end, I am not sure it is the right of any individual to siphon any public fund. All of the monies that SLFA gets, these are all, FIFA funded mostly. Plus of course government funding, which are almost always used each time Leone Stars or any other team has a game. So in the end, we know that accountability processes matches, for example. You have 30 officials, each person has $10,000 or $20,000 by my estimation, mostly 2, 3, 4, 5,000, depending on how they arrange things. So you see that instantly. But then when you have cash coming from FIFA, say $1 million, people would begin to ask, how was this spent? So if you have a situation where you send whatever, infinitesimal amount of money to your own personal company, it will raise some alarm. So that is why when he was released from CID, I saw a video of him saying he's okay with the investigations and that he has not committed any wrong. It is now left to the ACC to investigate further and suggest to us what the situation is, because it is my thinking that all of us want things to go right, and it's not just for the SLFA. Every ministry, department or agency has a responsibility of making sure that they do what is right. And I'm sure the ACC is equally doing what it's mandated to do, because in the end, if there are allegations of corruption, I think they have a responsibility to investigate that and bring things to book. So that's why we're having these conversations.
Also, I think the commissioner mentioned, ACC boss mentioned that the president was accepting per diems for travelings he didn't make.
I cannot speak on the fact of President Bureau accepting per diems for traveling
for the SLFA.
The SLFA president?
Yes, okay. The SLFA president.
My thinking is talking to President Bureau. I cannot speak for Daddy as well, whether he is taking per diems. I am a civil servant. I have never been given a per diem for a traveling I did not make. So my thinking is, if you're, taking any per diem, you must have traveled. Yeah? And so for you to take a per diem when you did not travel, I don't want to go into the books, but that is not right. Because per diems are not call it gratification funds. These are basically funds that are meant to upkeep your traveling. From my per diem, I pay for my hotel fee, for example. For my per diem, you have your food, your lunch, what have you. So it means you must have traveled for you to get that. So I cannot validate the authenticity of the assertion, but I'm just saying, for you to have, accepted same, you must have done the work. Yeah?
Alex, what's the way forward? You've begun looking into the case. What's next?
Yes, so what we have been doing in the past few weeks, I think from last week or so, is first off to keep the public up to speed with respect to the outcome, because there are suggestions, there are interpretations, there are connotations that sometimes, understandably so, that some people for whatever reasons have been given. So that is why public education, it's important in what we do. So we inform the public for them to understand the nature of these entire allegations, because interestingly also, Victor, there were times, based on what our investigation, reveals, that the account of the president of the SLFA would have extremely low balance. And during this time, 2021, 2025, all the monies going into that account are only coming from SLFA and several other things. So these are all allegations. And like I stated, no explanation has been provided to us, which is very scary. The president loves football. The country loves football. We spend on average $1 million per game. That's a huge money. We have been seeing some of our stars like Jumaba also going straight into an elite team. So we are focused as a commission in ensuring that people in charge to manage public resources, people in charge to administer the game, they don't act or use resources as and how they please. Whether it's coming from FIFA or it's coming from CAF or whatever institution, they are meant for the people of Sierra Leone. And what we are also very disenchanted about is the fact that at the heart of all of these, the only explanation that is being provided by the president is that he's acting on the basis of Section 36. And Section 36 is a general statute that we have specific financial regulations that general statutes cannot override. You cannot, for example, accept per diem when you do not travel, and so many other issues. We also have issues of bid rigging, which is an allegation. Motorcycles were purchased, but the contract was submitted to the second lowest bidder. And we know the processes in public bidding. You give the contracts, depending on the context in this one, to the lowest bidder. And why was this contract awarded to the second lowest bidder? No explanation was provided. So at this point, we are poised as a commission to ensure that people become accountable in whatever capacity, whether football or not. It is not a ticket to get monies that you do not work for whatsoever, as the matter is at this point. So we're poised to ensure people become accountable, and that is our focus at this point, and definitely we'll keep the public up to speed with respect to any developments.
I would like to ask how soon this could be wrapped up, because the elections are on the corner, and this could perhaps have a toll on his candidacy, perhaps if he's running again for presidency,
we
given the timing of this whole situation.
We basically do not countenance those external factors.
Okay.
We are guided by law. We work and do our operations within the scope and boundaries of the law, the Anti-Corruption Act, the amendment, and other best practices. So whether or not elections happens, that is for that, but our focus is on the substance of the matter. And these allegations, they are damning, they are very serious. So what we will do, we will determine the best course of action, because again, we understand that this is not the first time we have made intervention in football. We have also had some insight in the previous matter that had to do with Aisha Johannes, so we have knowledge about that. So we are still trying to determine what's the best course of action that we would take, and would inform the public. But what would assure the public, as always, is that we are very uncompromising as a commission for public resources to be used judiciously, and for clear-cut processes in the utilization of public resources to be followed to the letter. And anything less, definitely, that warrants our attention, we investigate fiercely, fairly, and dispassionately.
Right. We are fast rounding off now. Putka, do you have any departing courtesies on the conversation?
I think these conversations are always necessary. We all owe it to ourselves to do what is right. If we do so, we would have minimized a greater aspect of the vices happening in society. And so whilst we may not be at 100% scale of doing things that are right, we have a responsibility to do all of what is right to minimize all of the harm.
Right. Thank you so much indeed for gracing our show this morning.